Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to this new podcast, the podcast about 10 questions related to the cloud. Today we have Jeremy Pedersen with us. Hello, Jeremy.
Hi, guys.
So I always use the first question to basically to introduce yourself, who you are, what you do.
Okay, great. So I'm Jeremy Pedersen, as has been said. I am a training advisor at Alibaba Cloud. Training advisor is really just a teacher. That's the key component of what we do. Alibaba Cloud has a team called the Academy. That's my team. Their job is to provide instruction for people to help them better understand Alibaba Cloud. I'm actually part of our international team, but I'm based in China. So I live in Hangzhou, and I've been in Hangzhou for about 3 years now, almost 4.
But you are not Chinese, right?
Yes. So I've been in China for almost 6 years, actually. So I can speak some Chinese. It's not great, but I can get by.
All right. So the second question is related to your cloud journey. And maybe you can tell us about your first steps towards the cloud.
Okay, that's a longer story. I guess I have to go back to college for that. Let me think about it for a minute. So actually, when I first heard about the cloud, it was, of course, Amazon AWS, because that was the first big major public cloud that everyone got to know. And I would say 2007 or 2008, when I was still an undergrad, some of my friends were starting to play with it. And at the time, I was actually very dismissive. So I was a really hardcore Linux guy, full open source, all about having my own hardware. And so I thought, oh, the cloud, I don't need that. That's just renting a computer from someone else. There's no advantage. Why would I want that? And it wasn't until after I moved to China that I even really started to use my AWS account. I actually created an account back in college and then never touched it. And then, of course, when I came to work at Alibaba, I got an Alibaba Cloud account and started playing around with that. And now I'm at a point where I have my own applications and websites hosted on both Alibaba Cloud and Amazon. Don't tell my boss. And I am a regular user of both of those platforms. Starting from a position of total skepticism, I came around to actually using multiple cloud providers day to day, even for my own personal stuff.
Yeah, really interesting, because I also started my journey with AWS, and a few years later, I jumped into Alibaba Cloud. And since almost 2 years, just getting more experience and expertise in this platform. And also our website and all our tools are hosted in Alibaba Cloud at the moment. So I will say we are also using it a lot.
Good, that's good news for me.
So the third question is more related, you already mentioned it, cloud advantages, but there are a lot of them and we cannot speak about all of them. So maybe you can focus on the biggest one for yourself.
Okay, sure. Well, I know what sort of the original motivations were for people moving to cloud 10 years ago. Most of that was to do with scalability and reducing maintenance costs and having the ability to scale up and down flexibly. That was sort of the first wave. For me, as an individual and as someone who likes to call themselves a developer, although I'm not really all that great as a programmer, the big advantage is actually automation. Automation and actually consistency as well. So consistency of interface, consistency of API. So when you're using something like Alibaba Cloud or AWS or Azure or GCP, one of the really cool new things that just really wasn't possible before is you can treat both of your infrastructure and your application as though they were code. So, if you're a user of something like Terraform or AWS CloudFormation or Alibaba Cloud ROS, you get to write scripts that define your entire deployment, including the infrastructure it runs on. And then modifications you make are committed to version control. And so you can treat the whole architecture of your system as this replicable, automatable unit. And that's really, really cool. I think that's a special advantage of cloud that has actually changed the way people build and deliver software. It's not a small change, it's a very big change. That's the key advantage, I think.
I agree. And I was surprised that you didn't mention anything about costs, because nowadays with this situation, companies are just looking for reducing the costs, and the cloud, if you know how to use the cloud, it can be also a big advantage.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for my personal website, it's actually hosted on object storage. Actually, it's in Amazon S3, right? So the costs for that are extremely low, way, way lower than if I was running WordPress on a virtual machine. That is a big advantage, and it's an advantage that accrues to people who know how to use the cloud properly, like you said. That's an important point, right? So it's not always as easy to use tools like AWS Lambda or Alibaba Cloud Function Compute to automate a web API and then tie it to a front end that's deployed in some kind of web storage. But if you can figure out how to do that, if you have that skill set, you can take something that might cost tens or hundreds of dollars a month to host and get your costs down to like $1 or $2. So it's a really impressive cost reduction as well. And I think people also have a tendency when they're first getting started in cloud to overlook some of the other advantages of the platform in terms of add-on services, like the ability to do logging, like have logging as a built-in component and some types of security defense as built-in components saves an enormous amount of time and effort and money that you'd have to devote into security engineering and architecture. So if you're on Alibaba Cloud and you're using something like Security Center or Cloud Monitor, you're getting all this automated information all the time about what you can do better to improve performance or find bottlenecks or patch security vulnerabilities. And you're not having to do any of that yourself or hire a security expert. It's just there. And a lot of it's free. So that's a big cost savings as well.
Totally agree with that. And the next question follows a little bit this topic because it's related to cloud skills and cloud knowledge and how to use the cloud. I believe that in the future, knowing at least the very basic things about cloud is going to be a requirement, a standard that anybody in the IT industry is going to need. What do you think about this, about my opinion, so to say?
Obviously, I've joined the training team at Alibaba Cloud, so I agree with you very much that this is super critical. I think people that don't have at least some baseline experience with one of the big 3 or 4 top cloud providers will have a harder and harder time getting a job in the IT industry. And some people might think, oh, well, I can ignore that because I'm a developer. I don't have to worry about infrastructure. That's somebody else's job. But going back to what I said earlier, a lot of infrastructure is code now. If you're someone that traditionally does infrastructure or ops, it's time to learn to code. And if you're someone that's a developer, it's time to learn infrastructure. Those roles are blending into each other. And you're really going to have to spend some time to figure the cloud out. That's actually something the Academy tries to help all of our students with. That's why we put so much time into these basic courses on things like, what is Docker? What is a container? What is virtualization? How do you do CI/CD? Because we think these are going to be critical skills.
They are, definitely. Not only in the future, also right now. But good points. I think you touch really important points, and I totally agree with you. So the next question is related to hybrid cloud, because hybrid cloud environments are used, I don't know, they are very common in any industry that companies want to go to the cloud. However, they cannot go 100% to the cloud, or they don't want to. Can be for security reasons, can be for privacy reasons, can be for, I don't know, there are a lot of reasons for that. What's your opinion about these approaches?
I think a lot of companies are reluctant to put in the effort, because there is a steep learning curve, to put in the effort required to replan, redeploy, and relearn how to manage infrastructure on the cloud, because it's done so differently than it was done in their own data center or their own co-location facility. But I think, I mean, obviously, I don't want to be too harsh here, but I think some companies are just going to have to take that step. It's one of those things you just have to decide one day that you need to do. You need to get up one morning and say, you know what, fine, we'll figure this out. But there are, of course, tools and technologies that can help with that. I mean, I see some cloud providers going in the direction of providing what is called like bare metal. Like, I know this is something both Alibaba Cloud and AWS are doing, where you can install your own virtualization stack. So a lot of companies are already using VMware. So, you know, if you're really uncomfortable learning a whole new paradigm, you can just lift and shift your VMware VMs into VMware running on some cloud provider. That's something you can do. I think that's a short-term solution. Really, at some point, those companies are going to have to adapt and really learn how to use the cloud platforms that they've migrated to natively. But it's, you know, it's a good stopgap to help people get their feet wet and get started. In terms of hybrid cloud, I think hybrid cloud is a good mixed strategy for cost reduction, actually, because most companies and applications, or excuse me, most companies have an idea what the baseline load is for their applications. It's the burst loads that they can't predict. So if you're buying your own hardware and your own storage devices to handle your steady state load for your application, in some cases that can be a lot cheaper than renting it from a cloud provider. And if you've set up things correctly, you know, like for instance, Kubernetes on Alibaba Cloud has this feature, you can actually scale out onto the cloud seamlessly. And I hope that that's what people start doing with hybrid cloud. I mean, for some companies, hybrid cloud means like, you know, having a VPN tunnel between like a data center and some network group on the cloud, and that's their idea of hybrid cloud. But it can be so much more of that. You can have applications that seamlessly grow out onto the cloud as needed, and then can shrink back down when they're not needed anymore. And I think that's the best, you get the best price performance when you do that. Maybe if we have time in a little later, we can talk about multi-cloud too, because there's some unique challenges there.
Yeah, then just continue with multi-cloud.
Oh, okay, great. So multi-cloud, one of the issues with multi-cloud is, of course, I was talking earlier about how one of the great things about modern cloud providers is consistency of interface. You have an API you can call, you have an SDK you can use, so that you can manage your cloud resources. But that's great if you're using one provider. But all the major providers have their own a set of design paradigms and templates that they follow, their own design patterns, their own way of their own conventions for naming their products, different product limitations, different regions. In Terraform, if you're a Terraform person, each cloud provider will have its own so-called provider in Terraform with a different syntax and a different set of required parameters, even for setting up the same type of system. So like a load balancer on Alibaba Cloud won't be set up the same way as a load balancer on Google Cloud. In Terraform even, they'll look different. So actually, that's where your company comes in. We need more new, fresh talent who's interested in sort of abstracting away some of these differences between the major providers. I think that's going to be key to better multi-cloud adoption, is having some management system or layer that can help you easily manage your infrastructure across clouds. You know, you need unified logging, unified dashboards and monitoring. You need the ability to handle deployments in a consistent way. And that's something that is going to have to be provided by a third-party tool, because of course the cloud providers are competitors and they're not going to cooperate together on that.
Yeah, that's clear. We are huge fans of Terraform. It makes our life pretty easy, so to say. And yeah, we use it on a daily basis for working with multi-cloud providers, so to say.
Yeah, Terraform is great.
Yeah, and following with this topic of multi-cloud or multiple providers, we already know that there are a lot of players in the cloud world, so to say. There is AWS, Azure, GCP, Alibaba, Tencent, IBM, Oracle. You know, there are a lot of them. How do you think the market is going to look like during the next years? Do you see the small providers growing up, or you see, I don't know, what do you think about that?
Oh man. If I was good at that kind of prediction, I wouldn't work here. I'd be like trading stock or something. But I would guess, based on my limited experience with other software and hardware marketplaces, that there will be consolidation. That seems to be the trend here. Cloud in particular is a business that benefits from scale. The bigger you are, the faster you can go, sort of counterintuitively, and the more money you save. So I think what will happen is some of these smaller cloud providers will get consumed by the larger ones. And so the marketplace will sort of narrow down. It's also possible that some of these providers, in particular ones that already have an existing specialty like Oracle, they might find some niche that they can provide really, really well. You know, I mean, Oracle would hate this as a company, but I can imagine a world in which like Oracle databases were a cross-cloud deployable service on the other major clouds, and that was what they provided as their specialty. I think we'll see some of that. Like some of these smaller cloud providers will get consumed by the bigger ones, and some of them will actually become providers of third-party solutions in the marketplaces of the bigger clouds. I think that's likely to happen.
Okay, really interesting. I'm just thinking about that. Sounds reasonable, and also, yeah, let's see how the future evolves and how this business grows. Really interested on that. So the next question is related to China. As you mentioned that you are already living there, so I assume that you know a little bit how it works. Well, we see a huge increase and a huge growth on the cloud market in China, already becoming the second biggest cloud market in the world after the US. How do you see this in the future? Do you see more, and how is the adoption of the cloud in China?
Actually, China is really, really an interesting case because at least for the last 10 or 15 years, mobile technology, cell phones, has been sort of at the forefront of internet adoption here. And as a consequence, there's already been this push toward like lightweight, agile application deployments. So the demand for cloud, when it became available, was already there. So it's a market that exploded pretty quickly. But on the other hand, it's a unique environment because Chinese companies like to be totally in control of what they're doing, almost like a micromanagerial type of mindset. So for a long time, the bigger enterprises here resisted moving to the cloud at all, or insisted that you would sell them software that they could deploy in their own data center, or they only wanted to put non-critical applications on the cloud. I think we've now finally, in 2020, actually sort of finally gotten over that hump where even local governments here and even major companies are now willing to put mission critical workloads on the cloud. So I think the growth over the next 5 years or so is going to be pretty spectacular. And there's already this mindset, even in very traditional industries in China, that they need to digitize. So they have this whole concept of, they call it the digital economy, digitalization, 数字化 in Chinese. So they've got this massive drive to adapt or adopt existing IT and new techniques in industries from transportation all the way to like chemical manufacturing. So everybody here is trying to do something with their digitalization program, no matter what kind of company they are. So I think there's huge space here for the local cloud market to explode. That's one of the reasons that I'm excited to be at Alibaba Cloud, is because we're like 40% of the local market here. So we're a big player.
Definitely. Really interesting. I personally have a lot of interest on that market, and I will keep an eye on that. So we are almost about to finish. Just the last two questions. I will say the 8th question is related to information. There is a lot of information out there, and it's impossible to follow all of them. So I would like to know how you filter or how you choose which sources to use to keep yourself up to date.
Oh gosh, there's too many. That's a really hard question to answer. I can tell you what sites I have blocked.
Okay.
I try to stay off of Reddit. Like that kills my study time. In terms of where I go for resources personally, obviously, apart from the Alibaba Cloud Academy page where I can learn about our own products, including the ones I'm not that familiar with myself, that's a good resource for Alibaba Cloud. In general, I like Stack Exchange and Stack Overflow. Just Q&A sites I find are the most helpful. And I think it's not the kind of thing you can put on a resume, but for anybody who's listening who's wondering what awesome cloud skills they need, here's one: asking questions. That might sound really dumb, but we're in a world now where it's just you and the API documentation. There's no book, and the API can change tomorrow, and no one will tell you. So you have to be comfortable going on Stack Exchange and going, hey, has anyone else seen this error message before? Because if you don't, you'll waste hours and hours of your day. So that's actually really important. It's not just seeking information, it's seeking help. That's a critical tool that you need to have. You need to seek help. That's one of the things the Academy hopes to be able to do, is be a provider of that help. That's why we put effort into our online and offline courses, so that we can be that source of help and the answer of those questions. And of course, besides us, there's huge communities on Stack Exchange, Stack Overflow, even Hacker News, that are a great place to learn what's going on in the public cloud and open source communities right now. And also, myself, I'm subscribed to Udemy. Some people like Coursera, but you got to keep studying. So I'm actually signed up for like a Kubernetes course and a Hadoop course right now. So got to keep learning.
Yeah, definitely. Keep learning. And thank you very much for sharing that information. Very, very cool stuff. And it's not dumb at all. I think it's really important to ask questions. And the last question is just related to one of the latest things that you learned that you want to share with us. Can be a cloud strategy, tool, whatever you like to share.
Okay, so obviously the first thing that comes to mind is something from Alibaba Cloud, because that's what I work with every day. For a long time, when I was in the GUI, in the web console, I didn't have a good way to get an overview of all the resources under my account. And we have this tool that's actually designed for isolating different applications. So it's like a security tool, basically, called resource groups, RGs. Turns out, if you go into the resource group console, there's something called the default resource group. And almost all of the resources under your account show up in a big list there. So now I finally have a view where I can see everything under the account, which is really nice. There's something similar on AWS, but I haven't used it in a year or two. So I can't remember what it's called. But essentially, it turned out that this security and access control tool also happens to generate a list of all my resources. And so I can figure out if I've left any test environments running, and then I can delete them.
Okay, I use for that Serious Audit.
Yeah. That's using an audit tool is probably the better way to go.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you very much for participating, for sharing your thoughts and your experience. It was for me a pleasure, and I'm really, really happy that you had the time to join me for this podcast.
Thank you. It's been great.
No, thank you for you, and that was it. See you in the next podcast. Bye bye.
All right. See you next time. Bye bye.